We Get Outdoors Nation. Today we are live with somebody who I've been following as he kayaks around the world for a very, very, very long time. And this guy has done all sorts of super cool stuff on many continents. Some stuff that will put smiles on your face, some stuff that may well scare you witless if you go and see it. And at the same time, he's silly enough to balance a kayak and bring a video camera out at the same time and make documentaries about it. Mr. Rush Sturges, welcome to the We Get Outdoors podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
No worries. Now, we were just having a conversation about how you're moving on from pro full-time kayaker kayaking. But from my perspective, that's how I originally got to know you. How did you get into boating?
I started boating when I was pretty much before, when I was like 2 years old. My dad would kind of paddle me around in a little kayak, and I started playing around in the pond shortly after that, and then really kind of started getting into it when I was about 10 years old, and sort of started doing the kind of professional circuit and traveling kind of full time right out of high school at the age of 18.
Wow. Now, there has to be a disclaimer that your dad is a pretty handy boater himself, hey?
Yeah, my dad still gets after it. He's a bit more of a skier these days, but definitely an outdoorsman, and has always been really passionate about boats and sailing, and has led a pretty interesting life. And I definitely owe my passion for the sport to him, no doubt.
And what was it? I mean, kids seem to go one of two ways. Either they follow in their parents' footsteps and adopt their passion, or they rebel and go the opposite way and say, screw that. What was it about kayaking that stuck for you?
Yeah, it's funny. I would say, my sister kind of did go that route. She sort of went the more rebel against it route, and took a more kind of academic career path, which is great too. And I wasn't actually sure if it was something that I was gonna stick with until I did a trip down the Grand Canyon with my dad when I was 14 years old, and it kind of opened my eyes to what the sport was all about. Because you're camping out every night, you're under the stars, you're really kind of experiencing it more as an expedition. Whereas before, paddling had always just been kind of like, day trips and adrenaline, and it was really fun. But I think there was a transformation for me, probably also that sort of, moving into adolescence. It was also kind of like a bit of like a spiritual epiphany, I would say, being on that trip, and then just kind of realizing literally in one moment, I remember the moment exactly. And I just was, realized that this is all I wanted to do with my life. And I'm still on that path. The passion has not burned out. It's transformed and changed a bit, but I still have that same stoke that I did as from that moment on.
And you've done that in terms of crafting where you live as well, because living in Little White Salmon, is that right? White Salmon?
Yeah, the town of White Salmon. Yep.
White Salmon. You live in one of the most iconic whitewater kayaking destinations on planet Earth. Was that by design or luck, or did you just go boating and get stuck there for a few years?
Yeah, I mean, this place has always been sort of iconic in the paddling culture. But yeah, ultimately just kind of ended up here mainly for one river, the Little White Salmon. That's kind of our bread and butter backyard run here. I actually just got back from a lap not too long ago, and I can leave pretty late in the day and, get back here in 2 hours and 15 minutes. And, you can paddle on that section. You paddle close to like 1,000 feet of vertical. So it's a pretty amazing run to have right out the door, and it's solid class 5, and it runs a lot of the year, most of the year really. So, yeah, you can within, year round here, you can paddle class 5 whitewater. So it's a really good spot because I can still handle business and I can still stay kind of current, and keep after, paddling, which is nice to be able to do both. So I feel very lucky. Most people, it's hard living in countries where, there's a dry season, wet season, and, good chunk of the year you just can't paddle. And we're very lucky here in the Northwest to have year-round water.
Yeah, I mean, look, my local river really is the Zambezi, which is 12 hours drive away. So I'm pretty jealous of, well, maybe
That's a good local river, though.
It's a very fun local river. That's the thing. It's just as I get older, work gets in the way more, and the boating season seems to get shorter.
Yeah.
So, what I really want to hone in on is how did you make becoming a pro boater work, or whether there's such a thing as a pro boater, I'm not 100% sure, but certainly go and make the lifestyle you've had for the past, I'm guessing what must be 20 years. How have you pieced that together for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I am one of the really lucky ones that was able to make a living off of paddling. You know, and it was a combination of definitely making films and paddling. And you know, I think that it's really hard in this sport to actually to get money from sponsors and to make a living off of it. I mean, I'd say that there's probably under 10 people in the world maybe that are, you know, fully making a living off of whitewater kayaking. That's just a guess, but it's somewhere in that zone. And for me, you know, I think I sort of approached it from the perspective of going after the sponsors that I knew could pay me money, and you know, was able to sort of put together 4 or 5 solid sponsors that, you know, were each paying me a good amount of money that I could make a living on every year. And in addition to that, I also made kayaking movies along the way, which I would also get the sponsors to pay money for. And then also I lived through the DVD era, which is long gone, but that was also a way I could sustain, as well as each year coming out with a new film and selling that. And so just combination of those things made it sustainable. And then there was a period of time too, about like a 5-year period, where I was actually just making enough money just off of being an athlete to sort of travel and sustain myself. So that's kind of shifted now towards, as we talked about a little bit before the podcast, I'm definitely gravitating more towards adventure filmmaking and producing, directing, you know, trying to kind of make that more the priority, although I do still have sponsors and I'm still, you know, still very active with kayaking, just kind of shifting a little bit in terms of what I want my, you know, main focus and priorities to be.
Yeah, I get that. And we're definitely going to circle back to making documentaries and films and stuff like that in a second. One of the things that I became very aware of, having had a few sponsors in my time, is that if you're not careful, you can end up kayaking for the sponsors as opposed to for yourself. How did you go about balancing that demand of the sponsor, because they obviously want their chunk of change back from you, and then pursuing the goals and dreams that you've got?
Yeah, I just always looked at the demands of the sponsors. For me anyway, it's always been a pretty small, like, it hasn't been that huge of a sacrifice, you know? Like, I mean, I've been through a number of kayak sponsors, and that's sometimes the hardest thing, is when there's another boat out there that you can't paddle and that is better than the boat you've got. And so I struggled with that sometimes, but at the end of the day, I always had to remind myself that, you know, by sticking with the sponsor I was with, I was able to make a living and I didn't have to do something else. So for me, most of the sacrifices have been really not, you know, haven't felt like too much of a burden, but the last few years, and the reason I've kind of shifted away a little bit is because I have started to become a lot less enthusiastic about social media and just the kind of feeding frenzy that goes on with just like the constant sort of feeling like you need to be putting yourself out there and tagging your sponsors and you know, being current and running big waterfalls or whatever it is that you need to do to get the likes and the attention. And I'm not knocking it. I think it's great depending on kind of like where you're at in your career. I guess for me, I kind of was growing a little tired of it. And so a couple of years ago, I kind of decided that it was time to sort of transition. And it's kind of interesting because now this year I'm sort of now like fired up again. It's sort of like the stoke is kind of rekindled. So I guess it's it kind of comes in waves a little bit. But yeah, to answer your question, like I guess I'm at a point now where I have, you know, I'm more excited about doing the trips that I kind of want to do, focusing on the rivers at all, like doing it more for myself, more for fun, and still having some sponsors and support along the way, but not having it sort of be this kind of all encompassing thing like it was for me for so long.
One of the questions I get asked the most, especially from a younger audience, is how do I get sponsored? And one of my things is often I say you maybe don't want to get sponsored. That's always a first thing. Consider it. But as it is a question that comes up on a ridiculous basis, what's Rush Sturges's top tips for getting a sponsor?
I mean, it's so cliche, but I mean, just relentless practice. I think, if you want to be the best at something or at the top of a field, you have to dedicate so much time and energy and focus. And if you do that and you really love what you're doing, the money and the sponsors will ultimately follow. And I guess it takes a little bit of luck as well too. And I mean, for me, it was, it was winning a competition when I was 18 and at the Junior World Championships. And like it was kind of like an instantaneous in for me with a lot of sponsors. And, so I was kind of lucky to just, and even if you win a big competition, it doesn't necessarily mean that that sponsors are going to be attracted. I think that you have to do a lot of self-promotion and, I guess the best thing that you can do is really make them happy and make them see that, that they're getting a return out of your performance. And I guess in this day and age, you don't even necessarily have to be at the top of the athletic field, although it's good if you are, but if you're just really good at creating content and telling stories and getting out there, I mean, there's a lot of different ways to make this lifestyle work. I mean, I have, good friends who are lawyers and nurses and some of the best kayakers in the world, like there's other ways to sustain this lifestyle. And it doesn't necessarily have to be from, having sponsorship support. In fact, you could argue it might be better in other ways, because it's such a grind, honestly, to really make it work. And there's not a lot of money, to be honest, not on this sport anyway.
Yeah, one of my friends who's sadly no longer with us has done a whole series of whitewater kayaking first descents all around the world, and unfortunately he drowned the other year, which was a real bummer, to say the least. But he was a chartered surveyor. And he used to go and negotiate his pay rise every year to swap it for extra vacation days, so that he was just building up this. I think he ended up with like 7 weeks a year of paid vacation, and then he took some unpaid vacation, and then he'd disappear off to Laos in like the mid-90s to go and paddle stuff that nobody's paddled before, all off the back of being a chartered surveyor. So you don't have to do it in that a pro full-time thing. You can still have a proper career and make it work with a bit of imagination, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's good for him. That's cool. And there's a lot of examples of that, in the sport. And the other thing too is what I see with a lot of people is it doesn't last. The Stoke doesn't last for everybody forever. Like I feel fortunate. It really has for me. Like I still genuinely really love kayaking, but I think for a lot of people, when you do it all the time and it's dangerous, and it can definitely it can wear on you when you feel like you're needing to kind of be at the top of the game. And so I don't know, I guess it's you really got to know that that's kind of, I think, what you want out of it as well.
Yeah, and unfortunately, most of us have to grow up at some point in time, and families and children and home loans and all that stuff seems to appear. And then you've got some big bills to pay and some adulting to do.
Yeah, it's true. I think there's no question that getting a mortgage and having to, I feel like now I'm kind of a bit of a slave to the system, but it's good. Everything has to sort of change at some point. And for me, all the chapters have been fun. I'm enjoying them all thus far, even though, a little bit more pain these days, and the injuries come a little bit easier and things like that. I don't enjoy that, but overall the transformation of life and all of its phases has been good to me overall.
One of the reasons why I stopped pushing kayaking, which was quite a few years ago now, was because I'd broken too many bones and dislocated too many things kayaking. How have you kept yourself structurally together? Like, I know you broke your back at one point in time, but how have you held yourself together over the years?
Yeah, I did my back about, over 10 years ago. And then the toughest one for me has been my shoulders. I've torn both my labrums in the last few years. And so that has been tough, but I'm actually now, I feel like at a really good point physically. And it's from doing a lot of cross training. When I was younger, I didn't spend much time in the gym or running or anything. And, now I meet with a trainer 3 times a week, and it's really crucial for me to stay strong. And I feel honestly like right now I'm at like I might be the strongest I've ever been just about, which is crazy because I feel like earlier in my career, had I spent more time with cross training, it would have just been so beneficial for my paddling. I really wish that I sort of had that structure. And I think that it would also help keep the injuries at bay as well. So, but I discovered it a little bit later on, probably 5 or 6 years ago now. And that's just, I think, crucial for me, staying healthy, staying strong. Diet, I do a plant-based diet, been plant-based for 6 years now and really enjoy that. Works really well for me personally. But yeah, those are kind of the things that I try to do to keep from getting injured.
It's interesting. There's a few whitewater kayakers now. Bren Orton, who you probably know, being one of them, who's moved plant-based. What was the trigger for you to go and drop the cow?
Drop the cow. Well, I guess it was, for me, it's definitely a combination of the it's the environmental component, it's the ethical component, and it's the health factor. And I read a few books on it, watched a few documentaries, followed a few athletes who kind of inspired me to realize, wow, it's totally possible. Not only is it possible to do, but there is an argument that it might even be better. But I think everybody kind of needs to find their own lane and figure out what works for them. And it just, for me, sort of discovered really not too far into it that it made me feel better. And overall I just really actually enjoy all aspects of it, from the cooking to the flavor to I really genuinely don't miss meat at all. Cheese is hard. That's been a hard one, but it's fine. It's worth giving it up for what you get back, I feel like.
I spent a lot of time in the Himalayas kayaking in the late 90s, and my first time there, I got there at the end of the monsoon season, so sort of start of September, and I came back home in February. Well, back to the UK for me then was home in February. And while I was there in that 6-month window, first trip, I just ate Nepalese dal bhat the entire time. I didn't eat any meat protein for 6 months. And after Christmas, suddenly started feeling more and more and more tired the entire time. It didn't matter how much food I shoved in my face, I was still exhausted. And I got back to the UK thinking I'd picked up some weird, wonderful third world disease or something or other. And I didn't have a job to go to, and I was watching morning TV, and they started talking about anemia. I was like, "Holy shit!
Yeah.
That's how I feel." And so I went to the store, bought spinach and a steak, and I felt better within literally within 24 hours. I felt better. And so I love your advice. But everybody's got to find their own lane, because I know that 100% plant-based 100% of the time doesn't really work for me. I don't need much, but there's a balance you've got to find.
Totally, yeah, and diversification within the diet too, and it's especially easier when you're living in a place where you have access to all different types of plant protein, and you can get all the amino acids and kind of everything you need if you're traveling and you're just eating dal. That would be hard. That'd be hard for me too, to just, and it is hard traveling, as well. I often find traveling is the hardest because sometimes you're legitimately eating less healthy than you would be if you could just eat the meat that was there, so that's a challenge. But in most countries, honestly, they usually have a pretty good, a lot of countries do a lot of plant-based, so it's makes it not too difficult depending on where you're at.
Yeah, 6 months of dal is special. That's all I can tell you.
Yeah, that'd be pretty hard.
I've done that several times. I spent several years in the Himalaya. Anyway, that's a whole different story. So I remember back in my youth, I remember the very first trip as a young adult that I was invited on. And without the parents' involvement, without anything, it was that, like, when your idols say, "Hey, do you want to come and do this?" And you're like, "What? You're inviting me?" What was your first trip where idols started saying, "Hey, Rush, come boating with us. Come here. Come do this"?
It's funny because we were in my generation was such a kind of tight knit group of friends and kids, and we really kind of did in the early days. It was, my first trip, I guess, was to Norway, and we went there as I was 18. The oldest person on the trip was 22. And it was kind of our trip. We kind of did it on our own, which was, looking back, it was, super loose. And along with, my good friend Tyler Brott, we kind of did a lot of our trips together. I mean, really, to be honest, it was more of the integral, like the kind of our core crew. And then when Steve Fisher started, hanging out with us, that felt big for sure. We just, idolized Steve and had his posters on my wall as a kid. And so getting to become friends with him, and then him, wanting to go on trips with us, and vice versa, it was, I'd say that was probably the kind of moment, where it felt like, was kind of in the mix. But but we always kind of were mostly, on our own expeditions kind of early on. And then, of course, Steve Fisher inviting myself and Benny and Tyler to the Congo, that was huge, and to this date is probably still the biggest sort of undertaking I've been on, and definitely owe that one to Steve for inviting me.
I was going to ask you about the Congo trip because I know that cameras seem to flatten out the perspective of like how big stuff is, and so the documentary you guys put together on the Congo trip makes the water look epically huge, but I'm also aware that the cameras flattened it a bit. So just how big is that river?
It really is big. I think the scale was hard to capture there. I think was that really kind of almost more scary. I mean, I've run the Zambezi, for example, at like really high water, and the waves kind of compress. And I feel like I've maybe even been on rivers where like the sheer like height of the wave feel bigger in some ways. But the Congo was just really different because, I mean, you have, 1.6 million CFS, and it's 700 feet deep. It's the deepest river on earth. And so, all these undercurrents and all this kind of just strange, like it was the only place I've been where whitewater doesn't behave the way it normally does in other places. It behaves kind of more like an ocean. And there's a great kind of, class. This was classic. Our very first day, the very first rapid we ran, actually, we flew over it in the helicopter the evening before to scout it. And we all agreed it looked really good down the middle. It was just, we literally referred to it as a riffle. And then when we got down to river level and we were scouting it, it was massive. I mean, it was like 15-foot tall faces, but when you're from up above and you're looking straight down, everything looks totally flat. And not only that, but there was what had been a wave at the top would form as a wave for 5 to 10 minutes. And then it would start breaking, and then it would turn into a big ledge hole. and it was, he was just had never seen anything like that. And it was like kind of at that moment, I think, where we all sort of realized that this was going to be a different type of, different type of river reading than we'd ever done. And also what made it scarier, because I feel like everybody could run the same rapid and get, hit by different laterals and features and kind of have a different line, so that was pretty scary for sure.
So it's developed almost its own ocean-like pulse then. If you can have something that's a wave, then it breaks, and then it's a ledge drop, that's just jeepers. You could walk back upstream, you could jump in your boat, put your spray skirt on, and what you think you're about to paddle is not what you're about to paddle. That's terrifying.
Yeah. And then also like the whirlpools too, which would just occasionally kind of open up in front of you, like, like a portal out of nowhere, to take you down. So, I don't think I'll be going back there anytime soon.
No, it wasn't. You don't have a burning ambition to get back to the Congo and go and explore more, or?
I mean, not to there particularly, I don't think. No, I mean, it's tough. I mean, I love, I really, really love, the parts of Africa that I've spent time in, from, Uganda and Congo, Madagascar, and Zambia. It's such an incredible place. But it's a hard place too. I mean, it's a tough, the rivers are, the tropical stuff is tricky with wildlife and, super remote. And, I think mainly it's the wildlife for me that it's kind of makes me more on edge to go back there. But I'm going to have to get back there at some point. Cause I'm working on a film. I'm sure you're familiar with the Henry Coetzee story.
Very friend. Yeah.
Yeah, he was. Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, been working on a project trying to do like a narrative film about his life. So that's like my next project. I'm really trying to get off the ground and get a script developed and whatnot. So I will have to come back over there at some point, I think, for one more kind of push to retrace some of his steps.
Which is a shame, because his stomping ground of the White Nile is I won't say is no longer, but it's certainly not how many of us remember it 10 or 12 even years ago. It's changed dramatically.
Yeah, no, I know. I haven't been back there since since Nile Special is gone, and that's quite tragic. I wonder if Murchison would be sort of the next kind of logical spot to try to do some filming, and I feel like I would like to still try to get back into there at some point, even though that place puts me on edge more than any other, probably.
Well, it should do. Too many. Yes, you can interview me one day and I can tell you about my first trip down the White Nile in '98. And there's I had some special memories, let's just put it that way.
98, that's amazing. That was long before I think my first trip there wasn't until 2005. So you were there early days.
Yeah, in a piranha storm, I think it was. I don't know if you remember that, the big bulbous front end and the flat back end. And, one of those. Yeah, I believed that I had to be terrified of crocodiles and that hippos were friendly. I don't know. I knew nothing about Africa at that point in time, and I've been very close to hippos. And on the plane on the way back home, I opened up the in-flight magazine and it started talking about Africa's most deadliest mammals Africa's most deadliest animals rather. And crocodiles didn't really feature that much, and hippos were number one. And I was like, maybe I should have been a bit more cautious.
Yeah, I mean, they're interesting though. Like, it's the hippos are, I think, the most dangerous animal on Earth. But they're interesting because, like, when you're in the whitewater with them or you're in the river with them, like I came really close to a lot of hippos. I mean, really just like not even a boat's length away on a number of occasions. They seem to be a lot more comfortable in the water. And I could be getting this totally wrong, but my understanding is they generally kill people on land. Like if they see you on land, their instinct is to kind of charge you. And so, like I felt like it was, you know, and I could be completely delusional here, but I felt like in the water, you could almost like have a connection with them a little bit. Like there was like eye contact, and it was like, they're really smart, you know, and you just like the vibe that I got in the water, even though I was absolutely terrified of them, was a lot better than the vibes I got from the crocodiles, which literally every crocodile we saw chased us and tried to, you know, kill us. So I like the hippos more than the crocs, even if they look worse on paper, you know.
Yeah, having lived in Southern Africa now for almost 9 years, what I've found in this part of the world is when you're in the middle of the river, you're normally fine. When you're on land, you're normally fine. It's the threshold of getting on and getting off the water, that sort of beach environment where it's a few feet deep, or land. That's the bit you've got to be really careful of, because that seems to be where most animals get. If you're going to run into problems, that seems to be where it happens.
That makes sense. Yeah.
And if you ever get any time over here, by the way, the highlands of Zimbabwe have incredible world-class creeking in there. If you ever get time to go and explore it,
nice.
Some of the best creeking I've seen anywhere. Better than a lot of Norway and a lot of Voss.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
But it's been quite inaccessible due to Robert Mugabe and dudes with AK-47s. But as that settles down more, it's getting more and more accessible and safe to go explore and see what's there. So if you're ever up for a mission, you can come look after me.
Yeah, no, that'd be amazing. I mean, I really, I love the time that I've spent over in that part of the world, and it's a special little zone you're living in there for sure.
Yeah. So we've mentioned a lot about filmmaking. How did you get into filmmaking? I guess maybe for your sponsors originally, but also how do you balance documenting stuff when, frankly, a lot of people would say, I just want to look after myself, screw the camera. How did you get into it, and how do you balance it out?
Yeah, I mean, that's always been an internal struggle for sure. I feel like, especially with running hard white water and bringing a camera down the river, and it's hard enough to just want to focus on, it's hard enough focusing on the white water, let alone thinking about how you want to shoot everything. And I think I spent a lot of my career, like the early part, doing a lot more of the filming, and then really over the last kind of like 5 to 10 years, I've been sort of grown into more of like a producing, directing role. And, I don't know, like I stepped away from filming for a little while, mainly for that reason, because I really just wanted to kind of focus on being the paddler. And I got to a point where I was actually able to like hire other people to help film. And now I've kind of come full circle, and now I'm totally back into actually operating a camera again and enjoying it. So I guess it's balance, I think that it kind of comes back to what we were talking about earlier in the sense that it's like, this is a sacrifice that I have to make in order to make this my life, and like, that's really the way that you can actually make money in this sport, is by documenting it and sort of, selling that content, selling the adventure. And then there's also the other side of that too, which is that I really enjoy the art form. I really like editing and putting the movies together, and giving other athletes exposure. I mean, I've really loved being able to provide a platform for up and coming kayakers, like Aniol and Rafa and Benny, and like promoting my friends, and like there's a lot of positives that come from being able to document stuff, and it is a small sacrifice, but it's worth it.
I was going to say, you're very fortunate to have a whole series of really close friends who are also incredible boaters, who can give you the opportunity to video them doing something crazy without breaking your own back doing it.
Yeah, no, last week filmed, Galen and Hayden running these, 90 plus foot waterfalls, just, half an hour from our place here in White Salmon. And it was nice to go out there and just like focus on filming for the day. And it's just so much less stressful than that sort of, feeling I got really not too long ago where I felt sort of compelled, like I should be running the waterfall, or I should be, doing it. And now I'm just kind of like, nah, that's like I have zero interest in falling off of that. My body can't really take it anymore. And it's just not really what I'm trying to accomplish anymore, So, but it feels good to be at that point in my life. Like it's much harder being in that in between zone where you're trying to figure out if you should be filming or if you should be paddling, and not really knowing, where your place is.
Mm. Were you there when Tyler went off Paulus?
Yep. I've been at Palouse for two of the descents. I was there for Tyler's descent, and then also there for Rafa's descent as well.
So that was. I guess was there any part of you tempted to give it a go, or were you just happy to be and go video it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Tyler and I were at that time on this sort of waterfall conquest, and leading up to Palouse, we had been running a lot of big drops over the course of several years, and I was really into it. And it was the switch everything kind of changed for me at Alexandra Falls, which I don't know if you saw that, but which was, I think, like a year or two before Tyler ran Palouse. And it was a world record at the time. It was 107 feet. Ed Lucero had done the first descent of it, but he was ejected out of his boat at the bottom, so it didn't count as the record. And Tyler and I went there with the intention of completing the world record. And Tyler stuck the drop, and my spray deck imploded on impact, and I swam, and I did 47 seconds of downtime, and came really, really close to drowning. It was enough time for me to really feel like it was maybe going to be it, and that really shifted my perspective. I mean, I still went on to run a lot of big drops after that, but it was kind of, I started to be more fearful, and Tyler just kind of kept running with it a little longer, but not much longer, because shortly after Palouse Falls, when he broke the world record at 189 feet, he broke his back not too long after that, much worse than I'd broken my back, and he ended up completely changing his life as a result. So everything kind of came to a bit of a screeching halt, I feel like, for both of us, in terms of like really trying to go for the super, super tall drops,
What do you think? I mean, Dane's but Dane did the big drop in Chile, was it last year? I think it was Chile, right?
Yep. Salto Male. Yep.
Yeah. What do you reckon what do you reckon is actually possible that somebody hasn't done yet? I mean, Palouse still stands up there as the biggest drop fallen over. What else is possible without killing people?
Yeah, I mean, I think that anything's possible. I mean, at a certain point, it's hard. At a certain point, it's hard because I think finding the right waterfall for it. That's always the hard part. Plenty of big waterfalls out there, not the ones that really lend themselves. I mean, Palouse just lends itself really nicely, because there's nothing else out there that I've found that's the same height as Palouse that just looks as clean. But certainly somebody will run something bigger. I mean, it's definitely, certainly not impossible. Aeration really makes so much possible in terms of height, I think. So I reckon we'll see, I'm sure at some point, a 200-foot waterfall paddled.
Wow. And how do you think that gear will have to be adapted to sustain the impact? Because the average spray deck and boat that you buy from a paddling store, I don't think that was ever intended to go and fall off a 200-foot drop. What extra do you reckon people would need to put in place?
Well, I mean, as you may be aware, like Tyler developed a system he called the chastity belt, which is what we also took on our Congo trip with us. And I really feel like I feel like the weak point in paddling gear is still the spray deck, because it can implode still, like if you get hit by a big enough wave. And certainly, immersion research, in my opinion, and many paddlers' opinion, makes the absolute best spray deck you can get on the market. It's awesome. But in terms of like taking just a massive hit, they often will implode, or, especially with that kind of impact from 200 feet, it shouldn't be expected that they would be able to sustain that. So I think that's kind of the weak point. I think, having a device that clamps down, that doesn't inhibit you from being able to get out of the kayak is important. And then also the next really, obvious thing is just oxygen, being able to have some kind of a breathing apparatus. And we had those on the Congo, but I imagine that by now the technology is a lot better. But I reckon at some point that'll just be commonplace. Like, we'll all just carry oxygen. I mean, why not? It's a little extra weight to have up here, but I feel like it would be really good.
And then there must be a part of it as well. This is my little speculative brain going, where you start treading into the world almost of skydiving as you go off the drop. And so managing the air turbulence becomes as important as managing the water turbulence.
Yeah, totally. I mean, and that's why you need the right amount of volume. And yeah, at a certain point, waterfalls also do kind of like start to kind of dissipate as they're like super tall, and so it's really hard to find the perfect drop that I think is going to be able to beat Tyler's record, but I'm sure it'll happen at some point.
Well, I look forward to watching the video or holding somebody's coats at the bottom. That's
Yeah.
It's interesting, isn't it, that many of us, myself included, have had moments in our paddling lives where suddenly we realize we're not invincible anymore. And for everybody, it's slightly different. Some people, it's a dislocated shoulder or a broken wrist, and other people, it's 47 seconds under the water. Just in terms of a bit of showmanship, like what was going on through your head for those 47 seconds at the bottom of that drop?
Yeah, I mean, that was a tough one, because it was I think it was the only time in my paddling career where I've actually kind of thought that I was going to maybe die. I've had a number of scary experiences, but that was the only time I've ever experienced euphoria and sort of gone to that place where kind of felt the panic, felt the adrenaline. And it's funny because the actual thought in my head was not like this foreboding awful thing. It was just kind of like, damn it, like now you're gonna die. It wasn't, but it was kind of like comical. It was really quite peaceful in a way. And you often hear people talk about near-death experiences, as being this, kind of euphoric and calming thing. And that's what it was for me personally. I know I've had other friends who've blacked out drowning, and they haven't had that same feeling particularly. It's just kind of like ended. But I definitely got the euphoria and just that kind of like, I think it's your brain probably releases some type of chemical or something to kind of calm you down, which is what it did, because I was sort of hitting that kind of panic zone. And once I did calm down and kind of relax, I was actually able to get myself from out of the curtain and out into the kind of main flow and ultimately to the surface. So yeah, that was what was kind of going through the mind.
And for those people who haven't seen that waterfall, I may put a link in the description below. Go and check out pictures, because when you say out through the curtain, that's a pretty impressive curtain that you've got to go and pop yourself through.
Yeah, not too pleasant.
So getting back to your videography and your documenting, how do you go when you're shooting something? How do you go about storyboarding it so you're going to get the content that you want without going and taking away the organic growth of a trip or an experience? How do you balance those two things?
I mean, I feel like with documentary filmmaking, it's you go in with a general storyline, storyboard, I guess. But ultimately, you never know exactly what you're going to come out with, especially if you're following a character and they're setting out to do something. And so, I mean, I guess, good example of that is Chasing Niagara, which is the last feature film I did, where I followed, Rafa's sort of 3-year journey to try and paddle Niagara Falls. And so there was a lot of stuff that happened in that process that couldn't have ever been really scripted, but you try to script out a general sort of storyline, if for nothing else than trying to get like the sponsors on board and attract the sort of support that you need to go out and do your mission. And so, yeah, I think it's capturing everything too. I've learned, it's always good to be rolling if you can. The verite stuff is often some of the best. It's the real emotions. It's not the sit down interviews. It's the real in the moment stuff that is compelling. This film that I just completed right now, the River Runner, has actually been really so different from anything else I've done, because it's not really verite. It's actually more of like it's a biography film. And so I've kind of had to learn like the other side of it, where it's like, now I think I learned a lot about getting better at actually scripting stuff out and making sure you're asking the right questions in the interviews and trying to build out a story kind of like before you actually film it in a way, and with the interviews and such. So it's I don't know. I'm still learning, I'm still, this is only my kind of second feature I've done. So I'm definitely always trying to figure out the process and figure out what works and what doesn't.
Before I come back to the River Runner, like Niagara Falls, in your opinion, how doable, and who's going to do it?
I mean, it's definitely doable. Like I wouldn't have gotten involved with the project if I didn't think that that Rafa could do it. It's like one of those things that you stand there and it honestly kind of feels like it goes. I always had that feeling standing there. But it was more risky with the rock fall and just the kind of regression of the cliff face there moving backwards. It was not really the best waterfall particularly, but I will not be surprised if some kid someday gets fired up and runs that thing. And honestly, I think they'll probably be all right. I do still to this day think that it kind of goes, but I definitely won't be there for it, and I'm not encouraging anybody to go there and do it.
Because you may well get arrested.
You definitely get arrested, yeah. The rapids below it are quite cool though, and I've paddled those before, the Himalayas. Those are pretty amazing. Also illegal. I guess I shouldn't be talking about that, but I don't think it's a problem.
Do you think drops like Niagara? Do you think that they are there's a lot of other factors with that waterfall that aren't actually the waterfall. There's am I going to get arrested? There's the hundreds or thousands of tourists on the bank and the boats at the bottom, and everybody knows Niagara Falls. If you took Niagara and put it, I don't know, somewhere in Washington State where there wasn't a road, wasn't police, wasn't everything else, do you think it would have been done by now?
I kind of do, actually. Yeah, I think that all those aspects of it make it a much scarier endeavor and put way more pressure on and especially the international border thing. That's a really tricky one, and the legal repercussions, like all of that, definitely I think will probably shy people away from it, maybe forever. It's hard to say.
Yeah, I interviewed a guy called Mick Fowler last night, who's has been for the past 40 years one of the world's leading mountaineers. What this guy hasn't done in first ascents really isn't worth talking about all over the world. And he was talking about his first big climb was the north face of the Eiger in the Alps. And so it was hugely iconic. It's typically got different camps on the way up there that they bivouac in that has names like Death Camp and stuff like that, where people actually died. And wow. And he was saying that the reason why he's pushed so many first ascents is he can't stand going and climbing stuff that other people have done. And there's all of the stories and a bit like on the Zambezi, you've got commercial suicide, which is a very paddleable rapid. It just screws with your head with the name. And so he was like, I'd rather do something where I have no idea what to expect and there's no names, no history, and no nothing attached to it, as opposed to go do something where people have died or people have got hurt or anything else. And I reckon Niagara kind of features in that category.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's fair. I mean, any river trip you're doing where there's sort of a lot of kind of I don't know, yeah, hype built around it can certainly make it a lot more um, intimidating, no doubt.
Yeah, I always find when anybody gets a camera out, my paddling ability reduces by what feels like 50% instantly. So self-imposed pressure. Um, so over the years, you've done huge amounts of different paddling trips. Um, what's the one destination you just want to go back to over and over again?
Um, one destination, the destination I did kind of go back to over and over again a good bit was, well, certainly the White Nile in Uganda. That place was just special. But I also really have always loved Madagascar. And that's not too far from you. I've always felt like that was a really underrated paddling destination. I did 4 trips there. But all the classics, of course, Chile, Norway, New Zealand. Those are all places that I've been back to over and over, and will probably continue to go back to. And there's still some on the list that I haven't done that I still need to go and do. But yeah, I don't know. Those are kind of the favorites off the top of my head.
What's on the list that's still got to have a check mark?
Yeah, I've never been in Nepal. Never been in Nepal. I haven't really done much in the Himalayas, actually. I've only, I went to Pakistan, and we did the Indus for this new film, 3 years ago now. But I haven't done, I've been to China a few times, but not, haven't done too much overall in the Himalayas. So that'd be a place that I would like to get to.
Yeah, I have a little bit of a fascination with Google Earth. And as the geopolitical stuff moves around in the world and people stop fighting, and that often creates the opportunity for us to go explore. And Eastern Tibet in particular, you go and look at the topography there and the rainfall and the rivers. There's more whitewater kayaking to do that in that particular region than you could ever see in your entire life. And yet getting in there is, oh my goodness me. The Chinese don't make it particularly easy.
No, they don't. They don't, from my understanding.
But you should go to Nepal. Nepal's an incredible country with incredible people, and whether you want a float down rivers and paddle a playboat type trip, or whether you want to go and take a big creek boat and bounce down harder stuff, everything is there to go play with.
No, I'd love to get over there.
So you mentioned a second ago the documentary you've just finished filming, I think, The River Runner. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, so the River Runner I've been following. You're familiar with Scott Lindgren?
Yeah.
Yep. So yeah, expedition kayaker. For me growing up, I would say, Scott Lindgren's movies were kind of the most iconic within the sport. He was definitely at the forefront of really pushing expedition paddling and big expeditions. And to this day, he's pulled off, probably the biggest expedition anyone's ever done, which was on the Sangpo 30+ day descent. Just really pretty monumental within the sport. And so the movie actually follows his life story from childhood through, present day, and it's about his goal to run these 4 rivers that flow off of Mount Kailash in the Himalayas. And it's about these the sort of four rivers, but also about his medical journey as well. He ended up getting a brain tumor several years ago. And so it kind of follows his sort of medical progress, in addition to his goal to kind of complete this lifelong legacy of trying to pull off these 4 major river trips, which is, mostly archival footage over the course of about 20 years. And then we filmed the final river, the Indus, with him as well. So it's kind of that's kind of the story in a nutshell.
How did you find the Indus?
How did we find the Indus?
Yeah. Did you enjoy it?
Oh, how do I find it? Sorry. Did I
Oh
enjoy
yeah.
it?
No, how did you find it? I know you got on a plane, by the way, and then probably got on a bus with some boats. I know how you found
yeah.
it. But...
I was like Google Earth. No, yeah, it was a cool trip. It was definitely it was a really hard river. I mean, it's really really gnarly. I felt, again, it was one of those situations where I was like there to make a film, but I was also paddling the river. So I was kind of directing, but also on the river, and it was hard, like, I mean, Aniel is just like such an amazing paddler. And for me personally, I found the whitewater to be super intimidating. Big water's kind of always been the most intimidating for me. I'm definitely more comfortable on lower volumes, deep creeks and such. And just bombing into big whitewater, it was intimidating. I felt pushed. I didn't feel like I felt like I belonged there, like skill wise and everything, but my mental game, it was tough for me to get fired up to run the super gnarly, really big rapids. I definitely portaged in there more than I think that. Yeah, I don't know. I just was not like super on my like drive to go out there and feel like I needed to be pushing it. And that was fine. I had a great trip. I love Pakistan. It was amazing. Like, got to paddle so much good whitewater on that river, and had an absolute like awesome trip in the end, and everybody came off safe and sound. So it was good.
Mm. And I guess you had seen the rapid that Dane Jackson paddled, that huge thing that he paddled, I think 2 years ago on the Indus. What went through your head when you have seen the river, probably seen the rapid, and then you see Dane go and pop a line through it?
Yeah, it's absolutely insane. I mean, when I looked at Malupa, I just thought that there was no possible way that anybody would run it. I mean, I kind of could see that there was like maybe a possibility. It did, however, definitely change a good bit from when we were there. Like, just looking at the photos and the video, it's you can, if viewers haven't checked it out, they should. It's probably like the gnarliest rapid anybody's ever run, or one of them. But it's this next to this, this big landslide kind of thing. So which is just kind of shifting all the time. I do feel like it looked a lot more possible when Dane and his crew were there than when we were there. And it was just kind of this big closed out mess, but mad respect to Dane. That's really, really impressive what he did there.
Yeah, sent shivers down my spine, if I'm to be completely honest with you.
Yeah. Have you been to the Indus, or?
I've mountaineered, and so I've driven along the Karakoram in a bus, but to go mountaineering, I've never kayaked it. It's Daz. I don't know if you know Daz Clarkson, a British guy who did the solo descent on the 4 rivers off Everest, and he's paddled a lot of the Indus. And he's a good friend of mine, and he keeps saying, "Oh, we need to do an Indus trip." And I'm an old guy now. I've got a wife and kids, and but it's a special part of the world.
It is.
In everything that you've done, and so you're a guy who developed freestyle tricks to throw himself off waterfalls with. You've done all sorts of things. What have you done to help yourself manage your mental state in that? In that period of time where you've scouted something and you believe it's good to go, and you're hiking back upstream ready to go and get in your boat and then go and do whatever it is you've decided goes. How do you manage your head games at that time?
One thing that I've always done that's helped me is just reminded myself that when I actually get into my kayak and I peel out into the current, all those things that I'm feeling, like the apprehension beforehand, is going to ultimately go away. It's just temporary. And I've done enough of it now that I know that generally the apprehension is really the worst part, the fear and just kind of breaking through that barrier. For me, it's something that I guess with time I've learned to deal with. It's just like anything. It's practice. It's doing it over and over again. I will say, and I've always said this, that like I remember like the very first like kind of hard rapid I ever ran, which is not a hard rapid, but it was like a class 3 rapid when I was maybe like 10 years old or something. And I remember being scouting it and being so scared and like terrified, and like that adrenaline and that feeling that you get before, and really like feeling like you don't want to be there, in a lot of ways. And that same feeling that I got back then, it's like, I still get the same feeling today when I'm looking at some, really gnarly class 5+ rapid. And I guess like that fear and that adrenaline and all of that, it's all relative, to sort of where you're at on your, with your skills and in the sport. And so like, and that's what's so amazing about kayaking, is like, you really don't have to go out there and do the gnarliest thing, imaginable. Like, you can get so much out of the sport just by doing, fun, easy whitewater. It doesn't, or whatever it is that just challenges you and sort of pushes you to kind of overcome that fear. Because I think that is what's so great about adventure sports in general, is that, I don't want to say it's not conquering the fear. It's learning to live with it. And, kind of push through your own sort of the mental barriers that hold you back from trying, to do something, and I think that's, as long as you don't push it too far, you got to have, you got to have a level head, and you got to think it through. But I do really like enjoy that. It's a very fulfilling, aspect of the sport, I find.
I spend a lot of time in a high performance sports world working with professional athletes, most of whom go on to the Olympics or a World Cup or something like that. And we often talk about that progression of learning to deal with your own mental state, is that when it's go time, and in kayaking's sake, that's going to be the immediate lead up to a drop, or that stroke combination that you've got in your head, or the place you need to be. The anxiety needs to have passed just before you go and start having to be serious about it. And so people say, well, how do I do this? Because everybody says we need to progress and take yourself through it. And my advice is always, if you get to a point where you have to perform and do certain stuff and the anxiety is still with you, you probably need to dial it back a notch and go and put some more time in and a layer slightly down, just to go and get your head game that it can switch from that adrenaline, fear, anxiety into absolute clarity of purpose, paddle stroke, all that sort of stuff. It's experience really is a gift if you choose to go and get enough of it.
Yeah, I mean, like all that anxiety, all that fear, all that adrenaline, like it's all there for a reason, like that's all wired into us. That's part of our sort of, that's why we've evolved to sort of kind of live the way we do, I suppose.
But opposing thumbs.
Yeah. But yeah, I guess it's not letting it overcome you, and that fear is also contagious too. And it's hard if I'm sure you've been in a situation where you might have somebody on your river trip that's like, kind of like just jumpy in the field or whatever it is, like they've got a lot of fear going on. And when you have one person that's like that, it's not healthy for the group. You all kind of need to be like vulnerability, in extreme, situations is not always a positive thing. I mean, vulnerability can be really good in other aspects of life. And that's kind of something we talk a lot about, in this River Runner, film, actually, is how adventure and kayaking can really kind of turn you into, very, very stoic, very focused, very like, we just need to live through this, and not letting you don't let any feelings get in the way. And it can be really dangerous if you let that kind of attitude sort of trickle into your normal day-to-day life with your loved ones and whatnot, where you're in situations where being vulnerable is okay. And it is okay to be, open and admit that you're afraid of things, but under extreme circumstances, it's kind of different, and you really do need that sort of focus. And there's not really a place, there's a place for a healthy amount of fear out there, but not so much that it becomes dangerous to your performance, I guess.
It's interesting you mentioned that. I've always had a thing that I've stuck to on every trip, is that my decision about do I go on a trip or not is often focused around who are the people who are going on the trip as well. And you know, for me personally, to get the best out of Rob, I need to paddle with people who are quite jovial. They've normally got a smile on their face, and
Totally.
who aren't scaremonger, fearmongers, want to project their own shit on your shoulders. Those people like decrease my performance rapidly. And so I've actually turned down really good paddling opportunities and trips because it's pushy, but the people are that like twitchy, scared, nervous folks. I'm like, that's not for me.
No, I feel you. Like there's also, you know, a definite place for humor out there too. You know, like I feel like some of the scariest situations that I've been in, we've been able to have a pretty good laugh about it, you know, and it actually kind of can really sort of help kind of calm some of those nerves. And you got to remember, like you are out there to have fun. You know, this isn't supposed to be this just like completely sort of terrifying thing all the time. It definitely can be that sometimes, but that's not really what you're out there to do.
That's it. I paddled a lot with a British paddler, a guy called Steve Wetman, who did a lot of first descents in Chile back in the 90s. And he at one point in time kayaked through a tunnel through a landslide, and he could see the light at the other end and could see the start, but it couldn't quite work out what was going on for like one short bit in the middle. And so he just had this agreement with himself that no matter what happened when he got to that bit, if he wasn't too sure what to do, he'd boof left. And well, that was the day. He was like, well, I'm going to have to do something, so I'll just boof left. And he said if he'd boofed right or gone right, he'd have died. And then every time I go paddling with him, we're always walking back up to the top of what we're going to go and paddle, and we have a little chuckle and go, well, screw it. If it goes wrong, we'll just boof left and it'll be fine. And that's funny approach.
Nice. All right, I'll remember that one. I can remember boof left.
That's it. If in doubt, boof left. Don't ask me why, but it just puts a chuckle on my face. So you've done all sorts of super cool things. What's coming up next? The River Runner comes out soon, but what's on your to-do list, your bucket list, or the next 12 months to 2 years, COVID depending?
COVID depending, yeah. Work has been a little slow as a result of COVID, but I feel pretty fortunate still to you know be in a safe spot here relatively to so many others in the world. But yeah, the River Runner will be coming hopefully to a streaming platform near everybody pretty soon here. We're kind of working on that. Nothing set in stone, but a few promising leads. And then, you know, like, as I kind of mentioned before, I am focused on trying to tell kind of Henry's life story. That's something I've always been passionate about. That's cool that you knew him as well. And yeah, would love to try to, you know, I would like to see paddling make it somehow onto, you know, the silver screen, onto a bigger platform to like make a narrative. And that's kind of like my sort of big dream goals. And then additionally, I've got a couple other projects this year, some kind of more environmental type work, doing a few kind of random projects in the backcountry around the West Coast here of the US. But yeah, the plan is to you know, ride out this COVID thing, see how it pans out, and you know, still get out on the river every day here and keep enjoying it.
Awesome. Rush, I just want to say thank you for your time, but more than that, you probably don't realize this, but you said earlier as a kid you looked at posters of Steve Fisher paddling, and then that was the thing, and that motivated you or inspired you. And I guess the truth is, for a lot of young paddlers, you've become their Steve Fisher. In fact, I met a paddler the other day who I said, do you know Steve Fisher? And they said, Steve who? And I'm like, how can you be a kayaker and not know Steve Fisher? But Rush, you've become one of those people for those up and coming boaters to say it is possible. You can push it, and there's still more stuff to do out there. So thank you for being an inspiration to a generation. That's incredible. If people want to come and check you out, follow you, meet you one day, whereabouts do they go find you?
Yeah, probably just like social media, I'm posting on there every once in a while. And yeah, and you can check out River Roots, which is my website. And then I didn't mention it, but I also do music as well. And you can find me on Spotify as well under my name on there, if you're interested in that.
I forgot you do some rapping and stuff, right?
I do. Yeah, I'm pretty into music, but it's a hobby status, but I've been doing a good bit more of that. I should probably plug that also, but yeah, I've been working on a new album as well, which will be coming out this year simultaneously with the new film as well. So you can expect that probably later this year if I can ever get it finished here.
What a creative dude. Cool. Thank you for your time today, Rush. Folks, if you want to go and check out Rush, go and check him out on social media. There'll be some links below. Check out River Roots and watch the social media space, because I guess that will be flooded with the River Runner when it comes out later this year. Go buy it, download it, and view it to your heart's content. What an amazing story to tell. Thank you for your time today, Rush.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.